morning. I think it's 5 minutes to 12. But anyway, this is Comrade Funton Daniel. I will be speaking live here from the great state of Texas here in the United States, and on the legality and the question of the Southern Cameroon sovereignty. And this is going to be very, very interesting discussions that I am going to be speaking here. So stay tuned, don't go away. You know, I know I've spoken before about this situation, but before we come into these discussions and more, so stay tuned. This is Comrade Funton Daniel from the great state of Texas here in the United States, and speaking on the legality and the question of Southern Cameroon Ambazonian currency. And here again, I want to thank my viewers here in the United States, those in UK, Europe, South America, China, Asia, Russia, and most especially those in ground zero, and those in the neighboring country, La Republique du Cameroun. And it's quite interesting, you know. And this, I know this should be keeping all of us sleepless night and thinking about the statehood of Southern Cameroon, the statehood of Southern Cameroon. You know, and there are things that, as a statehood of Southern Cameroon, there are major things that leaders of Southern Cameroon must embark upon. And embark upon, it is crucial. You know, as a statehood, as a government, so that is what when they call a government, because the government is made up of several different branches, and that branches discuss the legality of a sovereign nation, and that including or embodies every major aspect, including financial aspect, the well-being of its citizens, the security of its citizens, the economic, the infrastructure. So that is why the government is like a human being. The government is like a human being and functions in those various actions your body takes. And so when one of the branches or one part of your body is not functioning, therefore the government is not functioning. So, and that is why I make sure that I embody every aspect that represent the entire statehood of Southern Cameroon. And one of these, you know, I know Ambazonian defense system are fighting against the invasion of the neighboring country, La Republique du Cameroun, in every aspect. And I really admired the voice and those working in collaborations to give the sleepless invaders, La Republique du Cameroun, in Southern Cameroon territory. And before, you know, usually I talk about the legality. You know, the people of Southern Cameroon has the right and privilege. UK did not have any right to think that the people of Southern Cameroon should be governed by a foreign nation, La Republique du Cameroun. The United Nations Decolonization Resolution 1514 of the United Nations resolution called for decolonization. It did not call for partial decolonization. It called for complete decolonization. So if every nation falls in those categories of decolonization, Southern Cameroon meet those criteria of decolonizations. And so people of Southern Cameroon shouldn't have been slaughtered by a foreign nations in regard, and the rest of the world just simply ignore the law they created. It wasn't created for a selected individual or a selected few or for a particular individuals. No, it was made generally apply for every nation that meet those criteria. And therefore, the people of Southern Cameroon meet those criteria. So therefore, recognizing them as a state is the first step moving forward. But since the world just assume that they can do whatever it takes. And if we are speaking about the legality, it should be universally applied to everyone, not selective applications, because we have a personal interest over the sovereign people that are seeking for legality of their sovereign entity. But, so, in fact, Southern Cameroon citizens have written every nation in this planet that has a stake of the United Nations. The United Nations have received documents upon documents of Southern Cameroon to respect Resolution 1514 and their statehood legality. United States, UK, France, every nation has received documents pertaining to the people of Southern Cameroon. And yet, it doesn't occur to them that it's something they have to take a matter of seriousness and deal with this and prevent human genocide. Of course, since it's African countries, it doesn't matter to them. So the soul can be killed and crushed so long as the interest of France is the priority as a permanent member of the Security Council. We have Russia, we have United States, Britain, China, France. But because La Republique du Cameroun is part of a colony, belongs to France, therefore it doesn't matter to them whether there is a legality between the state of Southern Cameroon, their right to existence. It doesn't matter so long as the interests of others are satisfied. The question of Southern Cameroon, it doesn't matter to them. And so that is why they want us to use the pathway, and that is the pathway the people have chosen. The good guys with the good guns to defend and win and sustain their statehood. And that is the pathway we have chosen as the right way. Because written to this authority, it doesn't matter to them. It doesn't matter that this is something they ought to look into. They say, okay, we are closely watching the problem. That's their possible language. We are closely monitoring the crisis. We are closely monitoring the crisis, as though the crisis came from out of a blue and that they were not fully aware of it. Southern Cameroon is not something that it should be closely monitored. It existed. First, the sovereignty of Southern Cameroon per Resolution 1514 XV, which called for decolonization, should have been fully implemented. So there's no case of saying that we are closely monitored. It's a crisis that ought to be immediately. Maybe because it's an Africa or third world country, it doesn't matter to them. Because since they do not have the nuclear arsenal, so why should we worry? It's the black regime or black race. That doesn't matter. They don't meet the criteria of the soul or the well-quoted race. And so this is a matter that African begins, especially the younger generation, begin to question the validity and the audacity of international community to be able to resolve problems. Because the children, as they're growing, we expose exactly what it is. And we're seeing that the injustice by systematically failure to recognize that the people of Southern Cameroon has the legal right to their sovereign nations. In fact, the people of Southern Cameroon has the most effective and brilliant government in entire West Africa. The first of its kind in West Africa to absolutely elected a prime minister, transfer power from its elected prime minister from Endele to Foncha to Joa without any political upheavals. La Republique du Cameroon, whom the world claimed to be the sole government to control the people of Southern Cameroon, has not demonstrated in a single capacity to transfer power from one elected just because they have their military that is backed by the French government. So therefore, it doesn't matter to them. Of course, if we see the honesty, sometimes they talk about audacity, they talk about veracity, talk about honesty. So if we are speaking about honesty, then this should be an honesty that we, the world, must stand and say no. of injustice. Just imagine the younger generation of Southern Cameroon growing up, seeing the injustice of the world community, deliberately, intentionally ignore key facts or key indicators on the question of the sovereignty of Southern Cameroon because they want to impose upon the people of Southern Cameroon. That is the world we live in. We shouldn't have reached this point where God should be the key factor, the definitive factors. We all knew the indicators and we all found, but we failed systematically to recognize the problems. And this is where we are moving. So the Ambazonia defense system are fighting to restore their statehood. They should have the right and privilege to be able to benefit from their own statehood rather than they superimpose a French derogative system upon the people of Southern Cameroon. We are culturally linguistic of English extraction, and we believe in a universal human right and privileges. We believe in education. We believe in the freedom of justice, a freedom of Anglo-Saxon way of life, and that is what we brought up with. But unfortunately, we've seen the system being perished away and submerged, as the French president, as La Republique president claimed over in the major media, that they have attempted to assimilate the people of Southern Cameroon. So, well, this is the life we have to move through. This is the choice we have to. So if the world has experienced similar problems, they should have been capable now to resolve the problems. Of course, we are monitored closely. That is the language they use as though they are not fully aware of the crisis and the magnitude. But today, that is not the topic that I'm going to be discussing. I am discussing the key fundamental issues that the people of Southern Cameroon need to move forward. And that is the creation of Southern Cameroon currency. You all see the symbol that has been posted. It has been in the circulation. But it is the time that we need to look closely. What capacity do the people of Southern Cameroon deserve to have their own currency? Because so long as we continue to holding La Republique CFA, we are a liability to La Republique du Cameroun because they claim we cannot move anywhere because we don't have a currency. So now I am looking at the terms who has the power to create a currency. But I look at it internationally. It is the people whom they claim, the people within a jurisdiction, and that they have a property, which is the land of Southern Cameroon. Let's look at the Southern Cameroon has a property, and that property is the land you see in the map. They have a United Nations document that voted in 1961, which I have just underneath of me in this broadcast. They have the moral value to be able. Let's look back in the United States. Let's look closely into the United States. Our local currency and unconstitutional. I am reading from the United States. This is a government, the most liberal government in this planet, the United States. So, and that is why they respect their law, and that is why I am often use United States as my key references. Let's read. In many places around the United States, localities and organizations have been printing money as a means to drive business towards establishment and raise money for the community in times of economic hardship. Perhaps the most well-established example of these are the Berkshire region of the Massachusetts. The Berkshires are slightly less valuable than the US dollar. You may get $100 US for 95 Berkshire dollars and can be obtained at a number of local banks and used in local stores and local stores. The IRS gets in on the act and taxes on the Berkshire purchases at their established exchange rate. In other words, United States recognize that a local currency can be created. Let's look at what the law of this nation clearly and explicitly state. However, Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1, the contract clause of the United States Constitution says explicitly, no state shall enter into any treaty, alliances, confederation, grant letters of marque, or reprisal, coin, money, emit bills of credit, make anything but gold and silver coin, tender in payment of debts passed by bills of attendant, or exposed factor, or law impairing obligation of contract, or grant in any title of nobility. This is what the United States law says. Clearly, the Berkshire region is not a state. The Berkshire region is not a state. So in other words, the law states that each state shall have no of those possibilities. But rather explicitly endorsement of the currency by the local government, and the local government in recognition by the state of Massachusetts seems to give the currency a tacit approval of the state. As such, how can the alternative local currency working to undervalue the US dollars in the region be a constitution? So when you look at the United States, so the people of Southern Cameroon has the right and privilege to create its own currency. And that is the fundamental value. That is the fundamental value that the people of Southern Cameroon must exploit this area of avenue. So we cannot sit and fold our arms and wait for La Republique. It is the moment that we must deserve that a sovereign state of Southern Cameroon must begin to reflect on its sovereign currency. It is pertinent that we must start looking on this morale of the creation of an experimenter. In my previous video, I suggested and I recommended an experimental research or currency experimental studies. How does this work? So we can allocate $100,000 US as a guarantee. So before I proceed to that of an allocation of 100,000, let's look at what is a currency. Most countries have their own currency. It's an important part of the national identity. Currency is an important part of national identity. Southern Cameroon should have been in the 60s, during the Funchal and Endel's era, should have been embarked on the creation of a Southern Cameroon currency rather than depending on a foreign currency. That should have been a key factor and key indicator that an identity of a sovereign nation must have its currency. And this is the most powerful indicator. And so therefore, we look at a representative currency. A representative currency. There are two forms of currency. There might be more. But I want to look at two cases of currency. You have a representative currency and a pure fiat money. Those are the two separate that I can recognize, but there may be more other economic terms or terminologies. A representative currency and a fiat money. So what is a representative currency? A representative currency is a currency that is backed by a goal. In other words, if we know that £1 gold represents Ambazonia currency, so we know that this £1 or 1 gram of gold represents Ambazonia currency, and we establish that, and that is generally accepted, that person holding Ambazonia currency can present a 1 ounce of gold and be able to exchange with the exact amount. That creates an economic stability. That creates an economic of just. That creates an economic of stability within the infrastructural system. So let's look at the pure fiat money. A pure fiat money is contrarily different from representative currency. In other words, a pure fiat money is either backed by the government treasurers, government. For example, the United States can guarantee that the US government can guarantee that somebody holding, let's say $500 US in a bank, the US government going to guarantee that 500, that bank has, that person having 500 in a bank is guaranteed or backed by the US government. So in case that bank becomes solvent or not able to provide that money, then the US government can provide that 500 to that person as a guarantee of that currency or that face value. And that is essential and important. That is essential and important. And that becomes what is known as the fiat or pure fiat money. So, let's look at it. As explained, those two forms of money, the representative currency, which is backed by gold, and the fiat money, which is backed by either local government or whatever government that has the authority to guarantee that the specific person having this amount is guaranteed. So what about the Southern Cameroon? So the Southern Cameroon has a pure fiat money. In this case, we can contribute $100,000 US in place, and that back up the money. Let's say the Ambazonian currency, as you may see the example that I just posted in this my broadcast. You can that amount of money, it represents this amount, and that we backing it with the US dollar with the understanding that if that person lose that amount, then that money can be backed by the US dollar. In this case, we are dealing with the pure fiat money. Maybe in due course of the process, we will be able to have our goal that we can back it up, that we don't need the US dollar to use the fiat money method. It is very, very crucial and very, very important that our people need to start migrating from the CFA and abandon La Republique completely while we are fighting the war that is going on to defend our sovereign identity. We should also be progressively looking on the aspect of the well-being of our people. In terms of other education methods, in terms of other methods, we need to gradually move in, leaving La Republique completely. Because so long as we keep on depend on La Republique, we became a liability of La Republique du Cameroun to continue to control and glue on to the people of Southern Cameroon. So it is vital, it is essential. There are areas in Southern Cameroon that are completely under the control of Ambazonia forces. So therefore, it is imperative that we, in those areas that is under our control, we began by doing the experimental of the test, the validity of this new currency that is vital to the sovereignty of the people of Southern Cameroon. It doesn't require any nation to guarantee that currency. It doesn't. It doesn't a foreign government to recognize it. Let's look at the Massachusetts. The Massachusetts is a state, or the Berkshire is here in the United States. So it doesn't recognize, but the US government does recognize the boundary. But what the United States want you to do is to be able to provide Uncle Sam taxes. That is vital, that you must respect Uncle Sam's taxes. So therefore, the people of Southern Cameroon doesn't need La Republique, because La Republique is not an Uncle Sam. In fact, the United States did not issue its own national currency until introduction of the greenback in 1859. Prior to that, individual banks usually issued their own bank note. So prior to this time, banks could issue their own currency because it wasn't universal. So other could be denied or accepted. But if you need that particular commodity, then you should accept that money as a medium of exchange until the United States have their own universal currency. But what I am saying is not that every individual in Southern Cameroon should create their own currency. But I'm saying that it is a time we need to start debating on the sovereign currency of Southern Cameroon and start developing a research study, feasibility studies, and the application and the format. It is something. It's not going when we move straight to Southern Cameroon, then that's we can do that. No, we can start now mobilization, doing feasibility studies and the ability to be able to migrate or to integrate into the Southern Cameroon territory. It is vital, it is crucial, it is essential that we start thinking about this moving forward. As time progresses, we will start looking at Ambazonian currency, how it can be backed by gold. And that should be another indicator as we progressively, we move and we advance our basic need and the recognition of our sovereign identity. And another key factor is the Southern Cameroon passport. The Southern Cameroon passport. Passport is issued by the people representative that stand, that they recognize their sovereignty, and that can be issued and any person, individual can obtain. So let's say we decided to move forward with these feasibility studies. We can conduct a research on to experiment to see the effectiveness. How does this become a reality? Southern Cameroon can take the passport and travel maybe to China, to Russia, to Ghana, to any African country. Once that country stamps that passport, it shows the recognition of the sovereign identity of Southern Cameroon. So experimental testing is the key indicator moving forward at this juncture. We cannot wait till the last minute. No, we need to progressively advance our own basic fundamental factor. I think this is the key that we must move forward. Fellow Ambazonians, fellow brothers and sisters, this is something that we must embark on and we must look forward as a key factor. Fellow citizens of Southern Cameroon, fellow Ambazonians, I talk about the statehood of Southern Cameroon and how the people of Southern Cameroon can move forward with its sovereignty and recognition, the importance of self-identity. Let's take, for example, France is a very smart person. France is very smart. And they knew that they have to control every aspect that deals with Africa as a whole. So France is very smart. So Africa need to think beyond the box. Africa need to think beyond the box. Otherwise, they will be glued by France to control every aspect of life of Africa. But we have to think beyond the box. Let's look at how France glued the Africans. French currency, or whatever now they have. Let me first of all drift off. First, let me look at about the European currency. Do you know why it was created? The European currency was created to counteract the supremacy of the US dollar. That is the simple fact. the US dollar because they knew every aspect of the world is using the US dollar. So France, with the rest of other nations, their purpose was to counteract the US supremacy over its dollars. And that is their ultimate goal. And that was their purpose. Whether you agree with my assessment or not, that is none of your business. But I can guarantee that the purpose of the creation of the European currency was to counteract the US dollar. And so therefore, the control, that gives them the ability to control. So Africa was deprived, especially the 13 colonies. France want a moment when they have to control every aspect of African life. And that is what they create, what is so-called the monetary union, the IMF, the World Bank. It is so guarantor that can provide money to circulation. No, it should be the government in a democratic institution. The three arm of government must decide the amount of money, and that through its arms or instrument that is in charge of those areas. For example, if the President of the United States wants to increase more money in circulations, they go to Congress, the Senate, before they have the privilege to authorize. They don't go to World Bank. They don't. Of course, do they go to the World Bank to ask permission to print the US dollar? Of course not. But Africa has to go to IMF to ask them. A sovereign African nation with its territorial integrity will ask the foreign bank IMF, which is solely controlled and by France. France has to appoint the CEO of IMF. That is where they control the life of Africa. So in a democratic institution that Africa must emulate is to create a three arm of government that should be independent of each other. And that this glue of one single individual called the executive control every aspect of the African life. And that is the mess La Republique is creating. Because Africans believe that, well, it was introduced as a moratorium by these colonial masters. And they glue African into it. That they have no voice, no privilege, nothing at all. So, Southern Cameroon can unglue all those aspects by thinking about the creation of an Ambazonian currency. Because once that is kicked into effect, La Republique is all gone. Let's think about the Nigeria. The Nigeria was using the British pound as its legal tender. But when they were continued glued by the UK, when the Nigeria decided to advance with the Naira, that's changed the dynamic. UK immediately abandoned the whole cause of control. So control is when you have control, when you have the means to control someone going to the restroom or toilet, the person has to ask you a key. Then the person obviously controls you alive. Because when the bowel movement hits your stomach, you got to look for a place. But when someone controls the key, then you don't have that passport. So Africa needs to untangle those glue that has been imposed upon them. And that France has imposed. So we don't need IMF at all times. Let's take, for example, if France needs cocoa from Ghana, then they will obviously have to take the price Ghana is offering for its cocoa. If now we talk about the economic of specialization. Of course, Africa were deprived of the industrial revolutions by imposing upon them that they have to import on what is so-called the Adam Smith economic theory. Africa need to bypass those economic theory and began to produce its own industrial revolution and forgo those economic theory, because let Africa become a consumer and production, not just importation of foreign goods and services. It's time Africa need to move forward with its own economic theory that have been deprived. The only people that have embarked upon this policy is the Asian bloc. They have dismantled all those economic theory and began to create their own evolution of industrial rather than thinking on the economic of Adam Smith theory. Those nations that specialize in the production of cocoa can now continue production of cocoa and import those they cannot. No, we have to bypass those theory and move forward with a new change of the revolutions. Fellow brothers and sisters, come back again to the Ambazonian currency. The people of Southern Cameroon need to start thinking about discarding the CFA that has been glued to the people of Southern Cameroon and start moving forward for the creation of Southern Cameroon currency. It's the key indicator if we are thinking about freedom. Freedom from movement, freedom of purchase, and freedom of economic freedom is to discard the CFA that have been glued upon the people of Southern Cameroon. That should have been thought about in the 60s, 50s, but they didn't think about it. But this is a key factor. While we are commanding control a certain area of our territory, we start immediately experimenting Ambazonian currency in circulations. And we allocate a certain amount called the pure fiat currency that will allow individuals to be able to purchase goods and services, and that has this backup. When we eventually migrate to gold, which is the backing of the currency, we can use the US dollars, a certain amount, which is the fiat policy, and start preparing for the sovereign statehood of Southern Cameroon. This is Comrade Funton Daniel, speaking here from the great state of Texas here in the United States. I want to thank you for watching, and I will continue on this Ambazonian sovereign currency and how we can create this and making it a more meaningful.